Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome indeed, wherever you're joining us from. Can I say my first very warm welcome to our guests here at FII in Riyadh in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Thank you for being with us. I'm Barrett, the host of this session. My second greeting is for anyone tuning in or catching up. This session is all about innovation, investing in innovation from tech transfer to entrepreneurship, not just here in Saudi, but around the world. And I've got a real treat of a lineup of guests to introduce you to. Before I ask them to join me and take their seats, can I also say that the joy of this session is your questions as well. So I welcome them. I won't force you to say who you are or where you're from, but that'll really bring this session to life. So welcome one, welcome all. I'm also very grateful to the Ministry of Innovation and Investment, the Ministry of Investment, for powering this particular session. So can we say thank you to the Ministry of Investment for their support of this session? Thank you, MISA. So, investing in innovation. Why don't we welcome our guests as they join us on the stage, please. Excellent.
Thank you, Ali.
I suppose my obvious observation as I introduce our honored guests is to pay tribute to our female collaborators, supporters, investors who make our innovation ecosystem thrive. We happen to be a group of gentlemen, but that in no way reflects the innovation ecosystems around the world. I want to put that absolutely on the record. I'm hugely grateful to you all for your time from around the world. Thank you for being with us. Let me introduce you to our guests in turn. His Excellency, Dr. Munir Eldesouki, is the President of KACST, that is the King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. Over 20 years of experience across research and development, innovation, digital transformation, and really shaping ecosystems across this ecosystem of Saudi Arabia. Received the King Abdulaziz Order of Merit, Excellence Medal of the First Class, and the King's Prize for Inventors as well. Dr. Munir, thank you very much indeed for being here. Now, His Excellency Sam Gyimah needs little introduction if you come as I do from the UK, former UK Higher Education, Science and Innovation Minister, board director of Goldman Sachs International, and the founder and CEO of SGA. Incidentally, as a government minister, Sam Gyimah had responsibility for a R&D budget of £8 billion. And today, SGA advises on a whole range of things at the intersection of geopolitics, capital deployment, and government. Sam, your first FII or a regular?
My first, and it's going really well.
Your first impression of this summit?
Terrific.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrific. I mean, great insights, meeting lots of people, the connectivity, the insights, the ideas, and very much on the issues that we're all trying to understand and grapple with. So pleased to be here.
I totally agree. Welcome to FII. Next to Sam Gyimah is Ali Aldan-Manhouri. Aldan-Manhouri is the CEO of the last few months, I gather, of Hunger Station. So many congratulations on the new appointment.
Thank you.
If you don't know already, Hunger Station is the biggest food delivery platform in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, recently acquired by DH, that's Delivery Hero, so congratulations on the acquisition. We want to hear the real deal from someone leading a very high-growth company, so thank you, Ali, for being with us. Speaking of entrepreneurial, Dr. Benjamin Liu needs little introduction if you work in the world of healthcare. He is the co-founder and chief executive of TrialSpark, and they are in the business of reimagining drug development. We're already intrigued, Ben. How do you reimagine drug development?
Yeah, so we use technology, AI, to transform everything about pharma with the thesis that as drug discovery gets more efficient, the bottleneck of bringing new medicine to patient is the cost and time of drug development. So we're able to run drug development more efficiently, and we acquire drugs already discovered to ultimately bring them to patients. So glad to be here.
Right, so you're sort of shrinking time as well. Yeah, this
Definitely.
is powerful, right? So just some of your investors include Sam Altman, Sequoia Capital is like a who's who, Michael Moritz, John Durr, and Thrive Capital as well. So kudos to you for all that you're doing. By no means least, Robert Nelson is the co-founder and managing director of Arch Venture Partners. He will cringe if I say rockstar investor, but that's how I think of you. You're an entrepreneur as well. You have played a role in the financing, creation, early sourcing for over 100 companies, including over, how about this, over 39 companies which have reached a valuation of over $1 billion. We're so grateful for your presence here. You founded Altos Laboratories, National Resilience, Beam Therapeutics, and Sana Biotech, to name but a few. Please welcome all of our guests. Before we dive in, by the way, Ali, I wanted to get just a little bit more on Food Heroes. So you're delivering across the kingdom. How does it work in practice? Because some of it, we all have a hunger that goes through these big events.
Yeah, so today we operate across over 100 cities in Saudi. Today we're a tech platform that links the customer, the rider, and the vendor, right? Whether that's a restaurant or a grocery store or a pharmacy, for example. So we link customers, riders, and vendors in this ecosystem, and we build technologies that serves each one of these stakeholders to deliver basically goods to consumers.
Yeah, understood. So right to their doorstep.
Correct.
Yeah, got it. And Dr. Munir, a little more on this sort of city of science and technology. This is a physical city? Is it a sort of, I sense a wider platform here?
Thank you, Ali, and thank you everyone for attending today and inviting me to be a speaker. So King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology is the leading science institution on behalf of the government of Saudi Arabia. It was established in 1947, and it has been acting as the policymaker, the funding agency in the national labs. But most recently now we converted its role to be the national lab and a science park for the city of Riyadh.
Yes, yeah. And physically headquartered?
Main campus is in Riyadh, but we have campuses around the kingdom.
Yeah, got it. No, thank you. Right. So I always think that I like a sort of snappy opening thought starter from our guests here at FII. So I'm going to say, if this panel was only 10 minutes long, and therefore you only had 2 minutes, and our exam question was firing up innovation, what investors need to know, what policymakers need to remember, but ultimately what serves the entrepreneurs and builders themselves. With a 2-minute thought starter, why don't we start with you, Ben, and then we'll work our way around the panel. Ben.
Right. I think a really important aspect of creating an environment that supports innovation is clearly defining what you can do differently than other ecosystems. And one thing that really strikes me when I'm in the kingdom is this notion of building and optimism. And there's other areas that I think have a similar ambition. I had the privilege of going to NEOM a month ago. And this notion of this is a place to build. What can we do uniquely that's different? And to not compete in areas that don't necessarily align with what you can do uniquely. So I think this notion of building optimism and in our industry, I think knowing where to play and where not to play is really important.
So is it almost a cautionary note against emulation? Find your own voice, find your own way.
Yeah. There's obvious places. I know we know some of the regions like Silicon Valley, Boston and Cambridge when it comes to the world-class, kind of biotech research. I think there's aspects here that can compete in the long run, but also really important to recognize.
Ingredients.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Munir, what fuels innovation? Your opening thought.
Well, what Ben mentioned is easier said than done. We've studied the innovation ecosystems around the world, and they would change from decade to decade in every country. It's not something easy to copy and paste. So I do fully agree. You need to create your own ecosystem plans depending on where you are, and actually it's very sector specific. But in the kingdom, we boil it down to 2 things mainly. One, how to bring the best talent into the innovation ecosystem, and that could be whether growing them locally or importing them from abroad, but making sure that the best talent exists abundantly. That's the most important thing we have to have. And the second thing is to make it easy for that talent to have an idea flow, whether from lab to market or other way around, and fixing anything policy related to do that. And in the kingdom, to address these challenges, we've launched something recently called the Innovation Authority, an authority dedicated to fixing the innovation ecosystem putting the entrepreneur and the scientist at the heart of everything that we do in a very agile way, adjusting policies very quickly, getting their feedback, listening to them, and seeing what they actually need for us to enable them.
So an innovation authority, is that a department? Does it work across department?
So it's an independent government agency reporting to the Council of Ministers. It's called the Research, Development, and Innovation Authority. And this authority doesn't own any labs. It doesn't have any active scientists working in it. Its primary job is to make sure that we have a healthy ecosystem, and everyone working in it has the right policies that they need. But it also manages the funding for the innovation ecosystem as a whole.
I'm struck by that idea of a healthy ecosystem being one where ideas flow.
Yeah.
They don't die. They don't run into brick walls left, right, and center. This is powerful. Sam, where would you like to fire up our thoughts?
I think the first thing I would say is that when you think about innovation, let's talk about scientific and technological innovation. People used to think the real economy is here and that bit of innovation sits there. But actually, science and technology now cuts across everything. Our prosperity, our health, national security, defense. And so it's really important for it to be front and center in terms of how we think about the economy. And the second thing I would say, particularly after given the turbulence of the last few years, is that technical sovereignty actually matters. Whether it's internet connectivity, whether it's your payment systems, all of these things, you need to have strategic control over some of these assets. And therefore, another reason why technology, innovation, and science has to be really front and center. But to make it work, a country needs to support a spirit of adventure. I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, and they don't sit there thinking, interest rates are too high, maybe I'm not going to set up my business, I'm not going to try something new. They just have this burning desire to start something new. And I think a system that fosters that spirit of adventure is one that really supports it.
I like that, and you're making me think about appetite for risk, resilience, attitudes to failure. Robert, where do we start? You've been in the middle of so many of these wealth creation stories, so give us the real deal.
Well, I agree that kind of optimism and kind of this feeling of energy you get in Silicon Valley, or I visited the garage here and I was like struck by real energy. I've seen a lot of incubators and not all of them have energy, and but I think a lot of it is about the tolerance for risk and not penalizing failure. So if you look at the innovative places in the world, the reason the Valley and Boston and a few other places are so successful and the places that emulate them are not as successful is because the penalty for failure is too high. If you were to think about eliminating people who failed from the US ecosystem, you wouldn't have Sam Altman, you wouldn't have Elon Musk, you wouldn't have Bill Gates, you wouldn't have Jeff Bezos. It's Jeff's first company wasn't going to work, and so it's a tolerance. Celebrating the people who failed and then succeeded is super, super important. If you think about science, most of science is failure. Almost every experiment you do doesn't work. And so you need to take that kind of ethos of tolerance into the entrepreneurial ecosystem, have very big goals, and rockets blow up. And and if you think about the kind of disruptions in the force that are happening now in terms of AI and other technologic breakthroughs impacting everything, that creates the opportunity for leapfrogging, for that. And I think then if you combine that with the right energy and embracing failure in some sense, then you're okay.
Robert, we can talk about the $50 billion companies that are in your portfolio, many of which you've started. The ones that didn't work, at those moments of, in your words, failure, how were you treated by the ecosystem? And were there things you wished had been different in how it was treated? Because that reaction is what you're zooming us in on.
I think when you're an entrepreneur in that sense, and we start the companies and we fund them, you kind of ignore. You have to have a thick skin and high tolerance for what people think, right? you just pick yourself up and go again. I funded the first cell therapy company and lost 15% of my fund on one company. And that's not pretty when you're trying to explain that to your investors. 15 years later, I funded the next generation of that technology and sold it for $12 billion, and it cured a lot of people. You have to have a thick skin, and you have to be able to kind of pick yourself up and do it again. Right?
Fantastic advice. Now, Ali, you're very interesting because you're a chief exec, but you're also, in your background, an entrepreneur. So give us your 1 or 2 minute thought starter on innovation.
So I think, from a startup perspective, I think it's imperative that, a company and startup in tech needs to invest in innovation. But I think the beauty is when that investment is in partnership with the government. So I'll give you a couple of examples of how we're working with our regulator, Transport General Authority in Saudi, on how we work on innovation to basically solve actual problems and serve our stakeholders. So a couple of examples come to mind on this. I think one is working with the government on what are the latest technologies globally in terms of improving rider safety. So riders delivering our orders. So today we're working on a collaboration to bring a telematics solution to make sure riders drive safely, to also reduce accidents and incidents on the way. I think the second thing is on facial recognition as well, to make sure that the customer's safety is protected. So the person who's actually delivering your order is the right person. So we're working on facial recognition technology to make sure that we know who the rider is delivering the order and make sure that the same person registered is actually the person who's actually delivering the order. So I think the beauty of innovation is when public-private partnership comes together and the investment is actually beneficial to all stakeholders involved. I think that's the beauty of innovation. That's when it really matters and works very well.
But in that, just very briefly, in that example, let's say the telematics example, is the government there a funder? Is it a technologist as well? I'm trying to understand the nature of the relationship.
I would say from an origination perspective, it was more of a concern towards rider safety. So the government would say, hey, we're trying to reduce the incidents on the roads, trying to reduce congestion, trying to reduce accidents. So what is there in terms of global solutions? Some of these innovations come from the government as suggestions in terms of connections to companies globally. Some also come from us as a part of a global network of a company like Delivery Hero in 70 markets. We also bring that to the table and we collaborate on what solutions make sense. And we help drive more improved regulation, I would say.
Yeah, do you know, it's refreshing to hear the government in that ecosystem of idea flow, not just the cheerleader, Dr. Munir, how, we are inspired by Vision 2030. What we're interested to know is how this region builds on its success to become this hub of technological innovation. And as you share those thoughts, I'm going to draw us all in to share examples from around the world of the secret sauce of innovation systems you've admired or experienced firsthand. But Munir, if you get us started, and then hopefully this will fuel some of our questions as well, please.
Sure, thank you. So if we go back before Vision 2030 and we look at how we were doing in science, we're number one in the Middle East when it comes to inputs to innovation. So that's research output, publications, patents, things like that. Translating that into impact was quite challenging. So over the past few years, after restructuring the innovation ecosystem, the Crown Prince, Prime Minister, became the chairman of the Innovation Council in Saudi Arabia to give us the right kind of regulatory push that we needed to enable innovation to grow very fast. And with that, within 2 years, we've jumped 18 ranks in the Global Innovation Index. We've seen the private sector's participation in R&D increase 25%. So how is this happening? We looked at some of the success stories like Hunger Station. After COVID, technology companies have grown very fast in the kingdom. Before that, we only had one unicorn. After that, we've seen more coming up in the market. They've been attracting more VC funds. So immediately after COVID, 2021, VC funding grew 300% in Saudi Arabia. This first half, we are the number one in the Middle East in terms of VC funds, although there is a decline globally. So the momentum in investors' appetite in technology grew in Saudi Arabia significantly after COVID. Delivery platforms, fintech, e-commerce, all of this boomed. What we were trying to do was to push them more into deep tech. And that's where we launched the Garage, a deep tech incubator, within the Science Park of King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this. This is its second mention. I'm going there later, I think.
I would love to host you all there. So what we've done with the Garage was to have a deep tech incubator that has access to all of our labs and our scientists. And this allowed to attract companies from around the world that want to access these labs as well.
It's a really powerful sign when the leader associates himself very personally.
Yes, I have an office there actually. So
Okay, right. So,
you.
let's go on our sort of time machine, travel scope. Where are we going? Sam?
I'll say Estonia. And the reason why I mention Estonia is whenever we all look at science in innovation, there's Silicon Valley, there's Boston, and everyone's like, why can't we be like Boston or Silicon Valley tomorrow? But Estonia is a country of 1.3 million people. Its GDP is 37 billion. Just to put that into context, the market cap for Saudi Aramco is 2 trillion. So it's a very, very small country. But they have really established themselves as a leader in the digital space. The home of Skype, that's where Skype was founded. You can set up a company there in 20 minutes.
So what have you noticed, though? How have they done it? What is the secret sauce for that fuel?
Digital first, making it very easy to start and set up a company. And I think that, along with the flywheel of talent. So what happens is when you have successful entrepreneurs, you celebrate them, they have an exit, they become the next set of investors, they start again, and that flywheel keeps going. I think Estonia has done that brilliantly.
Right. I want to keep whizzing a sort of Phileas Fogg around the world. Ben, where are we going? And by the way, if you want to name your home city, that's cool too. I mean, that's generous of Sam to take us to Estonia, but go.
Yeah, I think Boston and New York are interesting examples. Maybe New York a little bit more recently. It's interesting because I think the people in an ecosystem also can contribute to a culture of innovation. And I think there's a few qualities of these cities, but also there are qualities of leaders and entrepreneurs I know that drive innovation. One is a beginner's mindset. I think the most innovative regions feel like even though they've been at it for a certain amount of years, there's stuff to learn, right? The same leaders, right? We have, employees who might have been doing stuff for 20 years, but they still think they can learn something from the younger generation, the junior generation. I think cities that have macro optimism but micro pessimism is really important for innovation. So you think you can do something big, but if you don't have the micro pessimism of understanding, what are the practical ways of getting it, the innovation kind of stays in the cloud. Self-awareness.
Say a bit more on micro pessimism, because this could be my word of the day.
Yeah. So, I think any great project requires you to suspend, kind of maybe the practical kind of misbelief of whether you can reach that, right? Like we want to be this, most important tech city in the world. But without the micro pessimism, you just dream. You don't think about what are the barriers, what's that next step?
Your point, then, is that an individual can embody both.
Both.
You don't have to ascribe yourself to one or two camps.
And you have to hold the long-term optimism, but the short-term pessimism.
I want to really delve into this, get under the skin of these ecosystems, Bob. If you take us somewhere, but give us something that the outsider wouldn't notice, that only you have seen inside.
Well, first I have to 100% agree. This suspension of disbelief is like what you need to pick a big goal, right? It's 2030, it's NEOM. It's like picking these huge goals that people think are impossible and then throwing really interesting human capital at them. Yeah. So I would say Austin, Texas is the place I would think about what you want to be like, right? They have managed to start attracting human capital. That's the secret. You want to make a nest that is a nest that the curious will land in.
How have they done it, Bob? Keep Austin weird. It's a wonderful city, but are there things they've done to crank up the power of that magnet?
I think they had a shock, right, in California that they took advantage of, right? So they were open and welcoming, right? So the idea of welcoming the curious and making nests for people to land that have facilities like exist in Saudi that are physical places that you can come, and then you get the exponential effect and you get multiple of those people in one.
Let's build on that, Ben, and then Sam.
And very quickly, I think speed is really important. Momentum is something that builds over time very, very quickly. And from an innovation perspective, maybe just to kind of agree with Bob, I think certain traditional innovation centers, one of the things that's plaguing them is maybe over-processed bureaucracy. You know, we all know the stories, and it takes like years for even an ice cream shop to open in San Francisco. Austin, some of these other places said, we're going to make speed. You get quick yeses and quick nos, right? I think that's what an entrepreneur loves, is you rather get an answer quickly.
Okay, so you've picked, now, food hygiene, safety, very important, but there are scenarios, industries where speed will bump up against some big health concerns. Health, for example. How do those play out against each other when the mantra remains speed?
Yeah, so I think there's oftentimes an excuse made that you can't make high quality, like risk-adjusted decisions, and those with speed. And I think oftentimes it's punted, the hard questions, especially when you're innovating, and to Bob's point, like there's a lot of risk in a decision. Psychologically, you always want to give it more time. But you have to ask the question, what will time give you? Is it going to change the calculus, right? And I think that's really important.
Yeah, Sam, come on.
Yeah, I think we always think of the big policy that's going to completely change everything, but I'm actually attracted to sometimes quite small interventions that make a huge difference.
Nice, for example.
And there's this sort of tax policy in the UK called the Enterprise Investment Scheme that gives you 50% of your money back if you invest in a project and it fails. And what it's done is it's attracted a lot of small investors to invest in university spin-outs, to invest in all sorts of companies. But it's not up to about £200,000. But what's different for an entrepreneur, it's that it's been very good at bringing in the board directors, the mentors, getting family and friends rounds going, and it's become part of the funding architecture.
Yes, so this is the EIS and the SEIS, the seed.
Yes, SEIS as well.
Right. And carry on.
And I think just when you think of the funding architecture, we obviously think about what we need to do to scale to create a $50 billion company, and we need that. But not every entrepreneur starts there. Most entrepreneurs start with something quite small, with the ambition to create something big.
I
think these small policies can make a huge difference.
And just briefly, sense checking. There's a former government minister saying these small innovation, tax breaks matter. I'm just trying to get a sense of agreement or not.
Yeah, it's a piece of it's a piece of it, not everything. Right. But the incentive structures and alignment matter, and messages from government matter. And when you talk about speed, we're all sitting here in COVID, and we moved fast. But then the government in the United States reverts to the old model, right? And you say, hey, you can move fast once. How come you can't move fast twice, right? And you need to demand of government also to have best practices and speed.
So Ali, I'm really interested in these sort of cross-sector partnerships, actually. Are there, when you look around the world, some of the examples we're hearing, are there lessons that you and Dr. Munir, you're learning and would be keen to apply in the kingdom? What's coming to your mind?
I'll give you an example. I think there's sometimes innovation, like I mentioned, like it's very nice when it solves a specific problem for stakeholders, but it's also in collaboration with the government. I think my memory comes back to Kuwait, I think, where I was working with Delivery Hero at the time, working on logistics, and the government had an own app in terms of finding routes where you guide riders to drive depending on their vehicle type. So if you're driving a bike, you're not allowed to go on highways, and you use a specific app to navigate. In Saudi today, we're exploring similar solutions using the learnings from Kuwait and other markets across Delivery Hero to bring this safety to riders. So if you're riding a bike, you get to drive in a more safe route inside the city, so you don't get this route that goes on the freeway. I think these are examples of this collaboration with government that really...
These are good. These are great examples. Now, honoured guests, I'm asking for questions. It could be to all of the panel, to one of the panel. You can say who you are, but you don't have to. Let's come to you in our second row and then behind you as well. Hopefully we can find you with a microphone, if that is possible. I may have surprised the team. Here we go. We'll run one across. If you just keep your hand up on that first offer, and we've gone out and we're coming back in again. Here we are. And then we'll go just behind you straight after that. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Fadwa Al-Bouardi. I'm founder and CEO of a consulting office in digital transformation. My question is to Dr. Munir. Thank you very much for all the valuable information that you provided. Can you tell us more about the efforts of Saudi Arabia in enlightening the young generation in schools and universities on innovation and entrepreneurship? For example, workshops and trainings on the value creation based on innovation. Thank you.
That is excellent. Right, would you mind passing the microphone back? Dr. Munir, if you hold that question in your mind, and let's pass just to the lady right on the back row there. There we are, just behind you, right on the back row. There we are, with her hand in the air. Lovely, thank you. Please, if you ask your question, we'll be thinking.
Okay. Hello, my name is Dr. Rawan Al-Karbouj. I'm a founder of AtPoint, based on cell therapy or development of cell manufacturing. I do have a question for most of you essentially sitting in this panel, kind of the drivers of innovation and the future of biotech as far as healthcare goes. Given the first 3 AI-designed drugs that have entered clinical trial that in the recent years have been pulled out either because they just were ineffective or just completely failed. So the 0 and 3 sort of record, at one point some of us key scientists really thought this was one of the bigger milestones. But what are some contingency plans? Are we overhyping the process, or is it necessarily just a sort of a paradigm shift where it may not be necessarily the drug discovery platform, but maybe a systematic approach to medicine and healthcare? So I'm curious about contingency plans when it comes to AI and innovation in the future.
Fine, great. We'll hold that thought. Of course, I'll come to Ben and Bob on that. But Munir, first on the next generation question.
So thank you. That's a very important question and something very dear to my heart. We've been investing in the youth for a while now, and I'll just go back maybe 2 years. We in KACST, King Abdulaziz City, host students from high school that get access to very advanced labs that we have, and they get trained in them. So this is through a program from an organization called Mawhiba in the kingdom, and we send them abroad to compete in international science fairs. And I was lucky to be with them in Atlanta in the US when they competed in 2022. We look at the number of Saudis that were participating there. They were the 3rd just after the US and China. 35 Saudi finalists competed in Atlanta. They won 24 medals. 2 of them were first place. And what was very unique after that experience is that the Prime Minister hosted them in his office to congratulate them on that success. So that's how high up looking at youth and science is going in the kingdom.
A, inspiring young people, but B, playing on a global stage, opening minds.
Yeah.
Really powerful.
6 months after that, they won first place in Germany as well.
Did they? Yeah, through to the Grand Prix. Thank you. Ben and Bob, if you like, just on this, I want to take in more questions as well, so please show me where they are, our guests. Thank you.
Right, so I actually trained as a computational biologist, excited about how AI could have the potential to transform drug discovery and development. And I think, long story short, the reality is I don't believe AI has the ability to predict if a drug's at clinical stage, whether it's going to work or not. And partially because we don't have the data sets once a drug is being ready to be tested in humans to understand whether it's going to be efficacious. And it's going to take population level phenotyping across multiple disease states, across huge scales, across the genome, proteome, transcriptome, actually to make that prediction. So I think AI is helping maybe in the upstream discovery, like what binds to what, or maybe potential drug candidates. But we kind of started our company almost with that thesis that no one truly knows what's going to work until you run a clinical trial, and the biggest bottleneck is the cost and time of development. And so if you want to develop a strategy, acquire drugs already discovered, there's a bunch of AI companies going to create drugs in the top of the funnel, but what's overhyped is whether this can increase your probability of success once it enters the clinic. So I think it's not overhyped, I think upstream, but once you hit the clinic, that's the bottleneck, clinical trials.
Makes sense. Bob, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we're in I would throw out the old data, just ignore it. We're in version, not even 1.0 yet. AI is a tool. I do think you have to look end to end, from population data all the way to even redefinition of disease. I think there's room for, especially KSA, to innovate in regulatory approval relative to data. I think there's really a lot of new data that needs to be created for these models. I think it's going to be transformative to biology from end to end, and I do think we're really early.
Okay, now I want to get more questions in. Quick plug. I will be hosting a session on where generative AI meets regenerative medicine later this afternoon. So if you want more on that topic, please come and join us. Who has another question? We could go anywhere we like. Was that somebody pointing down here? No? Okay. I've sold lots at auction for less than that. Why don't we come to the front row, please?
My question to Ali. You've been talking a lot about innovation on the rider side of things in your business, while your business mainly focused on the restaurants. What kind of innovation you're driving as well to help the restaurants in your ecosystem?
No, definitely, good question. I think two examples come to mind. One is we developed this data insights platform, which is a service for partners and restaurants and vendors to get an understanding of where can they, for example, open branches, where it's the hot spots that people that are likely to like their cuisines be available. Also, they get also some insights around competitive data that's sanitized, right? Without disclosing any details of competitors, they get an idea of what menu items to serve, where to serve it, etc. The second thing is on financing of these partners, right? I think that's also a big topic. I think traditionally restaurants and partners are not able to get financing because banks are not excited necessarily to fund the restaurant because it's a very risky type of business. We have the privilege of having, of course, access and having historic data of the sales of the restaurant, plus the ability to also have the collections of the amounts. So basically, we enabled this service. We launched it a few weeks ago. We now have around 45 partners. We've already funded around 3 million reals, but it's just a start. It's just a pilot that we're scaling very soon.
These are brilliant examples. I love the idea of you as a platform, as a sort of entrepreneurial market maker, signing to entrepreneurs. This could be a fertile place to set up. Thank you for that question. Another question, observation, please. We'll come down to the front row. Thank you, team. Feel free to say who you are, and you don't have to. Welcome.
Thanks. Abdullah Al-Araj, managing partner at Foundtech Labs, a deep tech venture builder and fund. So my question to His Excellency, Dr. Munir, because we are talking about tech transfers, do you think it's going to be an issue for research institutes, universities, having an ownership in the spin-outs of companies, because it's going to be an issue for investors in later rounds?
Now, I know, by the way, sorry, Dr. Munir, I know everyone is wide awake on this panel, but I do want to blow that question open on tech transfer university spin-outs, because we want your most powerful tips. And Dr. Munir, of course, we want you to lead us out.
Thank you. So great question. Like I said, we're focusing on building an ecosystem. You can't have an ecosystem that's only one way. And just a month ago, the Council of Ministers approved an open access policy to all publicly funded research infrastructure. That's access to the labs and the data and the scientists. But your question is in particular to the participation of Saudi scientists that work in public organizations with the private sector in the startup community, which has been a challenge. And like I said, we have a dedicated innovation authority to solve this. So one of the things we worked on is how do we empower them to experience in a startup and to do that with minimal risk, although it is a very high-risky activity. There will be an announcement coming out soon on an entrepreneurial leave program for government employees. Entrepreneurial leave, where 3 years they can have their salary paid, and it can be extended for another 3 years that's unpaid. And this will be announced very soon.
So I suppose that tackles the risk side and softening that a little, but I think our questioner is hinting at the stakes that then might be owned by the universities, the entrepreneurs themselves.
Yeah.
A brief comment and then Sam.
So, in my opinion, I don't think universities are in the business of creating companies themselves. And it's really the talent, the students that come out of the universities that become the founders of great companies.
Okay.
And in that case, we worked on a technology development blueprint for all technology offices in the kingdom to write guidelines for how they can transfer technology to somewhat incentivize the economic creation and not the university having too much stake or too much control in the startup.
So forgive me, for clarity, not in the business of creating companies themselves, however, in the business of creating the conditions for great companies to emerge. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that is your sentiment.
Yes, so they indirectly fuel the economy.
Fine.
But we don't want the universities themselves to own all of these startups, to compete with the VCs.
Okay.
and make it difficult for IP negotiations.
Really interesting in terms of that cap table. Right, Sam, what have you noticed?
I agree with everything Dr. Munir has said. I am on the board of Oxford University Innovation, and we've been thinking a lot about this. If you go back to 2015, Oxford had 5 spin-outs a year. Last year, it had 31 spin-outs. The amount of capital attracted into the ecosystem was about $1.4 billion. And what's changed between 2015 and sort of 2022, not a very long period of time, is having its own dedicated venture capital. Yep. So that there's $1 billion available for every great idea that can become a venture and then a business. But they've also had to look very carefully, going to Dr. Munir's point, around equity stakes. Because one of the things that kills entrepreneurs is if they have a business and the university owns so much that it makes it very difficult to go to Bob to get him to invest because the cap table doesn't really work. So the university has had to review how much of the equity it can own itself, even though its facilities might have been used in creating.
What did they change?
I think it's 90-10. So the university gets 10% if it's a software company and something like 15% if it's a life sciences business.
Now, I don't want to lure our American friends into a numbers-based competition because we may get blown out the water.
I think it's probably more attractive there, but what I'm talking about is the game changer for us.
All right, so don't brag, you two. But what have you learned about this university conundrum, Ben? Because I want the no-nonsense version.
Yeah, I think you rather have a smaller piece of a bigger pie than a big piece of a small pie. And I think the less amount, the better. You see this in universities where huge companies are created. The entrepreneur has a lot of gratitude back to the university, and they donate back. But I think if it's too much, it's gonna crash.
Other than demanding the wrong size of slice, what's another example of something that universities do wrong when they're trying to foster spin-outs and tech transfer? Ben and then Bob.
Yeah, I think it's over engineering, and I think the best entrepreneurs they learn from other entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. So it's fostering the ecosystem, but you're going to have to learn how to raise money, do these other kind of things. And I think some universities over-engineer all the structure. In some ways, you're going to get less interesting entrepreneurs because by definition, you need to be able to kind of figure things out yourself. So
if I was tempting you towards bluntness, Robert, what is your pet hate when it comes to university spin-outs?
Well, we've been involved in I think 400 or 500 of them now, and I think that it's really when they get territorial, right? So it's a lot about what people have been talking about, aligned incentives. The most successful universities welcome technology from other universities into startups. So when you need to look outside actually your infrastructure and have catalytic individuals within the university who can look at what you have and then see something that is complementary.
Who's your rock star pinup for a university that does that well? Name and fame.
I don't think very many of them do it well, actually.
Okay.
I would say
Work in progress.
MIT is not
It's honest.
bad.
Well, we might have examples. We've only got 2 minutes left, so we'll take a really quick question or just here and then a really quick answer. But our time is running like sand.
My name is Dr. Anand, and I work for Goldman Capital, venture capital firm in life sciences from Singapore. In Singapore, when I was working for A-STAR, the government of Singapore, what we did is to promote academic entrepreneurship. We got entrepreneurs, both successful as well as failed entrepreneurs, to come and work with scientists.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a model that you are adopting? Because what we are seeing is when scientists work,
you've spotted that. Good question.
when scientists work as CEOs, the companies tend to fail. But when we get an entrepreneur from outside and there's a chemistry between the scientist and the business person, then it works very well. And that is a magic formula.
That is very appealing. I like it. I do want to know what's on the mind of your neighbor, and then we will talk over coffee probably, but please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nabia Zakline, CEO at Selena. I'm visiting from Boston, so this is a very fun conversation because I spun out my PhD work at Harvard to build a company. We're at 55 people right now, and workforce development is very top of mind. So would love your thoughts on how you're thinking about scaling that the world over.
Right. This is on the mind of our entrepreneurs all the time. Workforce development. Ben, your pithy thought.
The most important thing is to hire people that align with culture and values. Define very clearly what your values are and do not compromise on that. And if someone is misaligned, I think you want to make a move very quickly.
Would you be happy to have a short one-to-one afterwards?
Yeah, of course.
We've got time. If that's useful, we'll do
But
that.
most important thing is culture. I think that's how you innovate as a company. It's not one technology that you develop, but how do you foster innovation over time?
Yeah.
Maybe I could comment on the first question. So
Yeah, please.
A-Star is a great example, and it all goes back to building a successful innovation hub where ideas can flow. So the more entrepreneurs spend time with scientists, the more they can pick up something and say, hey, I could take that. But the passion has to exist. Scientists sometimes don't have the passion to manage the startup themselves. They want to be at arm's length. They want to be maybe a CTO at most, but not necessarily want to quit what they do in the lab and go pick up the startup. Whereas the entrepreneurs were willing to rent their house or even lease their house or sell it to make sure that their startup is successful.
Yeah.
Two different chemistries, but we need them all in the same place.
Yeah, well, can I say, firstly, thank you for that great question to close. Thank you, Dr. Munir, for that answer. Thank you to the Ministry of Investment for powering this session. Thank you to you all for being here. And most of all, let me just say, I've hugely enjoyed this conversation. So a massive thank you to Robert, to Ben, to Ali, to Sam, and of course to Dr. Munir as well. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, and thank you to you as well.
Thank you, sir.